Okay, this is presentation number 2, historical event in Newfoundland. July 29th, 1921, Adolf Hitler becomes the leader of the Nazi Party. November 8, 1932, Franklin Roosevelt elected President of the United States. March 12, 1933, first concentration camp is opened outside Berlin. May 10th, 1940, Nazis invade France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister of Britain. September 3rd, 1940, Britain, France, Australia, and New Zealand declare war on Germany. September 5th, 1940, Hitler plans Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. June 14, 1941, United States freezes German assets in America. August 14th, 1941, Roosevelt and Churchill announce the Atlantic Charter. December 7, 1941, Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. December 8, 1941, the U.S. and Britain declare war on Japan. December 11th, 1941, Hitler declares war on the United States. September 2nd, 1945, World War II officially ends. Now these are some very important dates throughout history, which have shaped the way we live today. But what do all these important events have to do with our hometown Newfoundland? 2 words: Atlantic Charter. In 1941, countries all over Europe were being invaded by Germany and its allies. With little resistance, Germany looked to be achieving its goals for larger territory reign. Then one afternoon, news swept across the world that 2 historical leaders, President of the United States Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, were meeting somewhere at sea. This somewhere at sea was actually a little fishing community in Newfoundland called Ship Harbour. Roosevelt and Churchill met to discuss their respective war aims for the Second World War and to outline a post-war agreement system. The charter they drafted included 8 common principles, and the United States and Great Britain would be committed to supporting in the post-war world. Among the most important of the principles were both countries agreed not to seek territorial expansion, to establish freedom of the seas, and to seek the liberalization of the international trade. While the Atlantic Charter was not a binding treaty, it was significant for several reasons. First, it let know that the sense of solidarity between the U.S. and Great Britain against the Axis aggression. Second, it laid out the foundation to what the post-war plans were for both countries. For his part, Churchill was actually anxious to forge closer ties with the United States, which was still technically neutral in the war against Germany. But both Western leaders hoped that a statement of common goals would deter their enemies and bolster the spirits of their war-ridden allies. The meeting itself was personally risky for both leaders. Large numbers of German U-boats prowled off the North Atlantic. In utmost secrecy, they agreed to meet up off the shores of Newfoundland, which was under direct British rule. Earlier that year, Britain had transferred a partial piece of Newfoundland, known as Argentia, to the U.S. for use as a naval base, in exchange for a number of aging American destroyers. Support for the principles of the Atlantic Charter and a pledge of cooperation in giving effect to them came from a meeting of 10 governments in London shortly after Mr. Churchill returned from his ocean meeting. This declaration was signed on September 24th by the USSR and the 9 governments of occupied Europe: Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Greece, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Yugoslavia, and France. The Axis powers interpreted these diplomatic agreements as a potential alliance against them. In Tokyo, the Atlantic Charter rallied support for the Japanese government, who pushed for a more aggressive approach against the US and Britain. This agreement is what led the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor and push the United States into the war. Some say this was the turning point in the war, meaning the Atlantic Charter was a very important milestone for World War II as well as Newfoundland. Now, I actually live about 5 kilometers outside Ship Harbour, and obviously that's why I chose to do this presentation. Growing up every year, the community would have its annual garden party on the date of the Atlantic Charter. I never really appreciated the significance of the event until I got older and read up on World War II. Looking back on that day, it really was one of the most important meetings in any war